This movie revolves around a young man's harrowing journey into the depths of prison life, where insults and threats are the order of the day, and survival hinges on choosing between destruction or rising as a hardened, formidable figure. It's a raw exploration of resilience in the face of darkness. The story begins with Danny, a man forged by the unforgiving environment of the slums. Growing up in a world of broken dreams and marginalization, Danny's life was shaped by the brutal law of the jungle, where violence was the norm and sanity was a luxury most couldn't afford. Survival in this harsh realm demanded strength, where only the tough endured, while the weak disappeared without a trace. One fateful day, Danny strolled into a billiard bar, looking to unwind with a drink, but his face told a different story. It was marked by a deep sadness, a longing for his mother. She was locked away in prison, caught red-handed as a drug dealer, a title Danny hated but could never erase from his mind. At the billiard bar, Danny encountered two familiar faces, former customers of his mother. For reasons unknown, the two men decided to antagonize Danny, throwing cheap jabs about his imprisoned mother. The anger simmering beneath Danny's surface began to rise. He charged at the man, ready to lash out. But before things escalated, Jessica, his girlfriend, intervened. She managed to calm him down, although briefly. The two men, relentless in their mockery, continued bad-mouthing his mother, fueling Danny's rage until it boiled over. Unable to hold back, he pulled the trigger, shooting one of the men in the head. The consequences of his actions were swift. Danny was arrested and sent to prison to face accountability. In the cold, clinical walls of the interrogation room, Danny was questioned extensively about the crime. As he recounted the events, glimpses of his childhood emerged, revealing the roots of his anger and pain. Danny's past was anything but idyllic. He grew up in poverty, with his mother as his sole pillar of support. But her love came with its own burden. At school, Danny often faced questions that cut deep. One particularly haunting moment came when a teacher innocently asked about his mother's profession. Danny, with a heavy heart, answered truthfully that his mother was a drug dealer. Despite the immorality of her work, she had done what she felt was necessary to send her children to school. For Danny, survival wasn't just a mindset, it was a daily reality. To earn extra money, he threw himself into children's boxing matches, learning to fight with grit and determination. Back in the present, Danny was escorted to the warden's office upon entering the prison. He wasn't alone. Beside him sat Greg, another new inmate, whose story was yet to unfold. Leaving the warden's office, the two were led into a prison ritual, a meeting with veteran inmates, where their heads were shaved, marking the beginning of their time behind bars. Within the prison walls, two distinct groups defined the social landscape, and they were anything but harmonious. The first group was led by Pierre, a man whose reputation matched his actions. Pierre and his followers thrived on tension and cruelty, oppressing other inmates with unmatched brutality. Trouble seemed to follow them everywhere, leaving fear and chaos in their wake. The second group, however, presented a stark contrast. Led by Jack and his right-hand man Shane, they were easygoing, humorous, and relaxed. They preferred harmony over conflict and avoided drama whenever possible. But their laid-back attitude was not to be mistaken for weakness. When provoked, Jack's group wouldn't hesitate to confront any problem head-on, ready to retaliate without hesitation. Danny and Greg got stuck in Pierre's cell on their first night as new prisoners, and Pierre wasted no time in asserting his power with some weird demands. He'd been in prison so long, he was desperate to hook up with someone, and he picked both of them. Greg was up first and was given an ultimatum: do it willingly or be forced to. It was a pretty awful choice, but if he said no, he'd have to deal with Pierre's wrath and his crew. Greg, who was too scared to fight, gave in to the threat in the end. But Danny was a different story. He valued his self-respect more than anything and refused to submit to Pierre. As a result, he ended up being targeted by the other inmates and faced brutal treatment. In the morning, Danny woke up with lots of bruises. At lunchtime, Greg was sitting next to Pierre while Danny, all bruised up, went to get his lunch. Shane from Jack's group asked Danny to join them, but he didn't answer and just went to get his food. When he got it and went back to the table, Pierre's friend kicked his food and bullied him. Even though Danny stayed calm, he didn't look scared at all. Shane was impressed by his bravery and asked Jack to take him from Pierre's group, but Jack didn't like the idea. After lunch, It was time for the inmates to take a bath together. Pierre and his friends then came back to mess with Danny again. During the torture, Pierre asked Greg to join in. Greg didn't want to, but he was threatened, so he ended up kicking Danny. He did it reluctantly at first, but then Pierre made him do it again, harder, and that's when it really hurt Danny. After the thing happened, Danny passed out. Nobody cared until the warden finally came to rouse him with a shower. The warden told him to hurry up and then line up with the other inmates. As the warden was leaving, Greg came to see Danny on Pierre's orders. Before asking Danny to line up, Greg said sorry for being made to kick him and gave him an orange as a peace offering. Meanwhile, the warden saw what Greg did and told Pierre, which made Pierre really mad. A little while later, Greg showed up and Pierre went after him, but then Danny also appeared and tried to help Greg, only to get beaten up too. Shane couldn't stand watching Pierre treat Greg and Danny like that, so he stepped in to try and sort things out. Jack, who knew Shane never backed down from a challenge, came over to help with the talk. In the end, they decided that Danny would join Jack and Shane's crew while Greg stayed with Pierre. Danny thanked Jack for rescuing him, but he couldn't help but worry about Greg. He was wondering what would happen to Greg now that he was left on his own. Danny had a blast hanging out with Jack's crew, way better than when he was with Pierre. He was really loving life and cracking up with his new friends. Poor Greg, though, always getting picked on by Pierre and his crew. After months had passed, Danny was finally visited by Jessica, but her arrival wasn't the reunion he had hoped for. Her face betrayed the weight of bad news. Jessica broke it to him that Danny's mother had passed away in prison, a gut punch he wasn't prepared for. But she wasn't done. She dropped another bombshell, confessing that she didn't see a future with Danny and wanted to call it quits. Danny was left dumbstruck, struggling to find the words. In a desperate attempt to hold on to her, he begged Jessica not to leave, his voice cracking with emotion, but her decision was final, and Danny was left drowning in sorrow. While Danny wrestled with heartbreak, Jack received a visit from his father. In contrast to Danny's grim encounter, Jack's father brought a glimmer of hope. He shared that his boss had agreed to hire Jack once he was released. But the warmth of that moment didn't last long. Across the prison yard, Danny's gaze locked on a troubling scene. Shane was being jumped by Pierre and his gang. Without thinking twice, Danny charged into the fray, fists flying. Chaos erupted as they threw down, but it wasn't long before the guards stormed in, shouting orders for everyone to hit the ground. Jack, fresh from his visit, caught sight of the clash and joined the scene, lying down beside Pierre. Without mincing words, Jack pressed Pierre, demanding to know his endgame. And just like that, the fight agreement was set. A showdown was on the horizon. That night, the eerie quiet of the cells gave way to yet another atrocity. Pierre, fed up with Greg, unleashed his crew on him. Greg fought back as hard as he could, but it was like trying to hold back a tidal wave. It didn't take long for him to collapse. Drained of hope and dignity, he lay motionless, staring blankly at the ceiling, his spirit seemingly crushed. Behind him, Pierre hunched over, meticulously grinding sharp metal, a sinister act with an even darker purpose. By the next day, Pierre's twisted plot came to light. He had prepared the shards of metal to mix into Danny's food, a deadly trap designed to take him out. But Greg, in a last heroic act, intercepted the food and ate it himself, sacrificing his life to save Danny. The injury was brutal and swift, and Greg succumbed shortly after. Fueled by rage and grief, Jack's group confronted Pierre, refusing to let this dirty play slide. Jack wasted no time, pushing up the date of the brawl to Saturday. When Saturday rolled around, the prison yard was thick with tension. Jack's crew stood ready, eyes locked on Pierre's gang as they approached. The moment was electric, and it only took a heartbeat for fists to start flying. The brawl was relentless, raw energy pouring out from both sides. But just as things were heating up, the security bell blared and the guards broke up the fight, sending everyone back to their cells. That night, something was off with Jack. His usual fire was gone, replaced by an unusual stillness. Shane, sensing something wasn't right, asked him what was up. Jack confessed he was feeling feverish. Shane moved to check on him. What he found was gut-wrenching. A stab wound hidden under Jack's shirt, the result of Pierre's cowardly move during the brawl. Realizing the severity, Danny took desperate measures, trying every way to get help. But their cries for assistance went unanswered, and hope dimmed with each passing moment. Jack, fading fast, uttered his final words, entrusting Shane and Danny to take care of the group before passing away in their embrace. The next day, Jack's father arrived to collect his son's body. The pain etched on his face was raw and unfiltered. He lashed out at the warden, furious over the prison's failure to protect Jack. Meanwhile, in the bathroom, Danny and Shane faced Pierre head-on. With emotions boiling over, Danny challenged Pierre to settle their feud once and for all in a one-on-one duel. Pierre, as cocky as ever, accepted the challenge, ready to throw down. The stage was set for the ultimate showdown. Before the fateful duel began, Danny took a moment to prepare himself mentally and physically. Turning to Shane, he opened up about his fear, not of death or pain, but of losing the fight against Pierre. Knowing full well how formidable Pierre could be, it was a vulnerable admission, yet it fueled his resolve. With determination etched on his face, Danny stepped into the fray, ready to face his toughest challenge. As the battle commenced, Pierre started strong, dominating the fight with relentless attacks. Danny, quick on his feet, focused on dodging Pierre's blows, biding his time. The fight seemed one-sided at first, with Pierre maintaining control, but Danny's persistence paid off. Finding his moment, he pinned Pierre down, delivering a decisive stab and choking him to finish the fight. The once dominant Pierre collapsed, helpless and defeated, marking the end of the duel. The atmosphere shifted as the warden arrived shortly after. Shane stayed beside Danny, bowing his head as both of them confessed to having stabbed Pierre. Their admissions sealed their fate. They were sent to special confinement, a punishment for their actions. The next day brought an unexpected visit from the warden. He offered Danny and Shane a rare treat, a serving of delicious food paired with a brief yet impactful conversation. It was a moment of reprieve, but it was clear that their journey was far from over. Following the visit, the two were separated and transferred to different prisons. These new environments were harsher, filled with dangerous mafias and inmates with serious criminal cases. Danny and Shane were thrown into a world where survival would demand even greater strength and resilience.